In this lesson, we will add bones for the eyes and eyebrows. Let's say we get started with the eyebrows. It's a really fast process. What we'll do is go ahead and access our bone tools. Might do so from the animation quad menu. And see how quickly we can go ahead and grab our tool set from here instead of going to animation, bone tools. It's not that big of a time difference, of course, but you get the idea. Let's go ahead and now choose Create Bones. We'll now go ahead and press the S key so we can snap to grid. If you do not have Grid Snap enabled, just go ahead and head over to your snap settings, go ahead and right click and take a look at what you have checked. So here's grid point snapping. Let's make sure that's on and nothing else so we can just snap to grid. Alright, so when we close this out, we can now go ahead and create a bone object. Let's go ahead and right click. Once it has been made, all we need to do now is go ahead and just start translating this back. I'll turn off snapping. Go ahead and bring this back so it's inside of our mesh. Great. Let's now go ahead and work with Bone Edit mode so we can grab that nub object and kind of pull that back to fix the length of this. Alright, sweet. So there is our eyebrow bone object. Now if you would like, if we were to turn off Bone Edit mode, you can go to the root. You can head over to your Modify panel and you could start adjusting the height. Maybe bring that down a bit. Doesn't need to be so large. It looks like 0.1 would work out very well. Or that's actually 0.01. Let's go ahead and make sure we use that for both the width and height to keep the size uniform. So again, I'll set the height to 0.01. I'll copy that value and use that for the width. Great. We know also that we'll need to recreate our nub according to those settings. So I'll go ahead and delete the original nub. Go ahead and grab the bone object again and choose Create End. Much better. Let's say we move over to our perspective view now. I'll press the Z key so we can zoom into our bone object. I'll also press F3 so we can take a look at things in wireframe mode. By the way, if your mesh is getting in the way, remember you could always just go to Layers and go ahead and freeze that layer. Great. Alright, so once the layer has been frozen, you can go ahead and grab the root of your eyebrow bone and kind of move that over so it's right where it needs to be for deformations to look natural. And all we really need here is just one bone object. We'll be able to get some really nice looking results. If you would like, you could also, after this course, go in and create a set of bone objects for each section of the brow. That way you can get a little bit more control over each section. But you'll know exactly how to do that once we're finished with this course. So remember, what we're doing is just going through some ideas here that you can take and run with and improve upon. Alright, sweet. So now that we have our bone object here in place, we can make sure that it is added to our skeleton layer. So with the root selected, remember we can double click on the root to grab its hierarchy, or we can press Control page down. Either way, let's go ahead and make sure we have both selected. We'll grab our skeleton layer and click on Add. Alright, sweet. Now, let's say we rename these bone objects. We always want to stay organized. You'll understand why when we get into skinning, it's going to be much faster for us to find all of these envelope objects by making sure we spend a little bit of time at this stage renaming those objects. So it's going to be BN underscore L, it's on the left side of the face, underscore brow 01. Let's now go ahead and copy that name, grab the nub object, paste, and change that BN to a BE. Right, sweet. So there is our eyebrow bone on the left side. Now, how do we take care of that bone object on the opposite half? Well, it's actually really simple. Here's what we can do. We can go ahead and grab the root here. We can then go ahead and grab the nub, and we can use the mirroring tool under our bone tools to go ahead and mirror this across. Now here's what I like to do. Let's go ahead and click on mirror. You can see we have this offset value we can use to slide this over in our x-axis, the mirroring axis. Now I don't quite like to find the value we need just yet for the bone. I like to put in a value that will allow us to select the mirrored copy. So once we find any value here, we can now go ahead and click on OK. And then let's go ahead and take a look at something. I'll close out the bone tools quickly so we can see this. That mirroring axis here is the x-axis according to our scene. And take a look at the axis handle we have to make that very clear. Okay, so knowing that, what we can then do is grab the original bone object that is in the right spot. We can then switch our coordinate system here to world to take a look at its world units. And take a look with our move tool, it says that this is where it is in world space, 0.033. So what we can do then is copy that value, go to the eyebrow bone that we're about to place on the right side, grab its root, and simply use the reciprocal. So we'll go ahead and paste, and instead of a positive 0.033, it'd be negative 0.033. So now when we hit enter, this bone has been perfectly mirrored. All right, sweet. So from here, you can see it has a suffix of mirrored. Let's go ahead and clean this up. We'll first change that L to an R, so we know that this is for the right half of the face. We'll then go ahead and remove the name mirrored. Let's do the same thing for the nub. Again, we'll change that L to an R, and then we'll remove mirrored from the name. All right, sweet. You'll see that the mirrored copy is not added to the layer, even though we have made sure the original bone was added to that layer. Now, if we had cloned this bone, then we'd have no trouble because it automatically be added to the layer. But in this case, we'll just have to go in, grab the two bone objects on the right side, highlight the layer, and click on Add. All right, great. Now let's go ahead and do this. We'll go ahead and grab both roots, grab our link tool, and link over to our head bone. Now we're ready to freeze our transforms. We don't want to do that in reverse order because we'll notice that when we use transform to 0, our bone objects are going to shift. See, what's happening is we're linking them and connecting them to a different parent space. So once that parent space has been established, we then want to go ahead and freeze our transforms so that it will freeze them according to this new space. All right, so now we can safely just go ahead and Alt-right click and choose Freeze Transform. Beautiful, so I've done that for the roots. Let's do that for the nubs. Those selected will freeze their transforms. Great. All right, so now as we start to test out our bone objects, perhaps after we've skinned, we can go ahead and now use Transform to 0 to bring them right back. Awesome. All right, well, once that's finished, we can go ahead and now finish up this lesson by working on our eye bones, and it's honestly going to be the same approach. And we might even be able to use the same bone object that we have here. So let's go ahead and start by just cloning the bone we have on the left half of the face. All right, so with both objects selected, the bone and nub, we'll go ahead and press Control V, and we'll make this a copy, and I'll click on OK. Now as we start to translate this, take a look, it's pulling the head bone down. Why is that? That's simply because that's how bone objects work. When we link a bone object, as we start to pull at it, it's going to drive that parent in an inverse kinematic type of way. So all we need to do is go ahead and unlink that bone object after it has been cloned, and now we can move it freely without that issue. So here's what we'll do. After we have unlinked it and moved it down a bit so we can select it a bit easier, we'll then head over to our side view and make sure it's placed in the right spot. So you can see how the eye has been prepared. You can see it's not an entire sphere, only half of a sphere, because that's all we need. So here's what we can do. We can go ahead and grab the root and start to kind of pull that forward and place it right in the center of our half sphere, because this is where we should control the pivot of the eye from. Great. And then we would basically want to take our nub object and pull that back. You can see how it's kind of been offset. I'm going to go ahead and undo that back, because what happened was I actually went ahead and unlinked the nub as well. So if you want to, you can take the nub object and link that back, and chances are we'll want to do that because we'll need bone edit mode to adjust the length of this chain. So after the nub has been linked back, watch, we can grab the root, grab our move tool, and start to, again, pull this forward so it's centered with the eye and right at that halfway point. And then we can grab our bone tools again, choose bone edit mode, grab the nub object, and then start pulling this back to adjust the length. So we're going to place it so it's right outside of the eye. Great. Now taking a look at this size, it looks like we can bring the size down a bit more, so I'll go ahead and turn off phone edit mode. We might as well just go ahead and remove the nub from here since we know that we'll create a new one. Let's grab this bone object and start to drop its height. So right now I have it at about 0.003. Let's go ahead and copy that and use that for the width as well. We'll paste, hit enter, and there we go. Now with it still selected, we can click on create end, and there we go, we have our eye bone. Awesome. Take a look at something else. Let's go ahead and head over to our perspective view. Again, since we have cloned from an object that has already been made a part of a layer, that object is going to be a part of the layer as well. But what about the nub? How come that's not a part of our layer? That's simply because we had to recreate the nub object. So it's a brand new object. We haven't assigned it to a layer yet. So with the nub selected, let's just go ahead and highlight our skeleton layer and click on add. And now, everything's good to go. Okay, so from here, it's a good idea to go ahead and rename this object. That's BNLI01. Let's copy this name to rename the nub. Paste, and that's BELI01. Alright, sweet. So from here, we know that we can go ahead and mirror this across. Let's go ahead and grab both bone objects, click on our mirroring tool, click OK. Just using an arbitrary offset value at this point. We'll go ahead and grab the roots of the original bone, grab its x-axis. Take a look, it's the same. There's no offset in the x-axis, so I'll just go ahead and copy that, grab the root that we'd like to move over to the right side, and paste in the reciprocal, so that's negative 0.033. Once we do that, we know that we can go ahead and grab both roots and have them linked over to the head bone. Alright, sweet. Now, with them both selected, we're ready to freeze our transforms. Instead of selecting the roots, freezing those, and then the nubs, remember, we can now go ahead and press Control page down to grab the entire hierarchy of both chains, and then we can right-click and use Freeze Transform to go ahead and clean those up. Beautiful stuff. Let's not forget to rename the mirrored bone. It's very easy to overlook that. So we'll just go ahead and remove the mirrored suffix and replace the L with an R. And we're good to go. Awesome. Well, that is going to finish up our eyebrows and the eyes. So in the next lesson, we'll bring our attention to the eyelids.